Hello, long time no see. It's time for some Bible tea.
All right, let's see it.
So I'm reading Deuteronomy 22 and it says this.
You must not wear clothing made of wool and linen woven together.
So naturally I'm like, why, Lord? When I tell you that I was not ready. So it turns out one of the reasons why God gave this instruction was because back then pagans would be wearing materials of wool and linen woven together. And so he wanted his people to be set apart.
So the Hebrew word here, sha'atnez, refers to this mixing of fabrics, and scholars suggest that this word is probably a borrowing from Egyptian. And it is absolutely plausible that the rationale here is don't do the things that the nations around you do, which is what Leviticus 20 verse 23 commands. However, it seems a little arbitrary to pick out this one little tiny thing where they're mixing wool and linen fabric, and to not pick out a number of other things that the nations around them did that they also did. The problem arises when we try to expand the scope of this regulation to the whole Bible and suggest that this is God's commandment to Israel. Because we have commandments in Exodus 28 and 39 for the priests to wear items of clothing made from wool and linen stitched together. Here's one example, Exodus 28:6. This is from the updated edition of the New Revised Standard Version. They shall make the ephod of gold, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and of fine twisted linen, skillfully worked. Now, I've highlighted two words in the Hebrew, techelet and argaman. And when we look these up in a standard lexicon like the Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament, you will see the lexeme at the top, and then you will see the bold gloss that explains this is wool, dyed blue and dyed purple. And so Exodus 28:6, and you can see the same in Exodus 39:29 for the sash that the priests wear, command the priests to wear articles of clothing made from wool and linen stitched together. Now Josephus noticed this, and so he comments that the commandment in Deuteronomy is probably for lay Israel, and that this mixing of wool and linen is probably intended to be set apart for priestly use only. And the issue is, are we interpreting this univocally, as if this is all coming from one single perspective and this is all speaking with one single voice? Then that's a way to make sense of it. But more likely, we have two different groups of people who are approaching this in two different ways. And one group says, hey, don't do this. The other group is doing it just fine and is specifically prescribing it for the priestly class, probably without necessarily limiting it only to the priestly class. So these are the kinds of problems that arise when you choose to approach the Bible univocally. You get compelled to have to make sense of things that were probably originally never intended to be juxtaposed or harmonized or reconciled.
I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting, but it's so much deeper than that. And I feel like this is the part where science is like, oh my gosh, turns out God was right.
No kidding.
Now from here, this creator is going to go on to misunderstand and misrepresent pseudoscience about the vibration frequencies of fabrics and how mixing linen and wool cancels the vibration frequencies out and how that can make us sick. And this is all pure and utter nonsense, but would also be very problematic for the notion that this commandment is coming from God, given that the commandments in Exodus 28 and 39 that also ostensibly come from God have the priests wearing articles of clothing of wool mixed with linen. Now, rather than go into the details, I'm going to direct you to a video by Dr. Blitz, who explains this much better than I do. You can see what the preview looks like, and I will tag their account in the description of the video, and that gives a much better breakdown of how this is pseudoscience and also how it is being misrepresented by this creator.